Hi all. We've been shut in for the last 2 weeks and you might be feeling discouraged. You feel like a failure because you've wanted to kill one of your kids or your spouse or maybe both. And yesterday we talked about casting your anxieties on Jesus. And you do that, but you just keep taking your anxieties back from him. So take heart. God isn't going to give up on you. Think of Elijah in 1 Kings 19. He was discouraged because reality fell short of his expectations. He had seen God send fire from heaven and demonstrate that he is the one true and living God. So the people slaughtered the 450 prophets of Baal, and God ended the 3-year drought. Elijah must have been expecting a revival of faithfulness to God, but Queen Jezebel sent a messenger to tell Elijah he was a dead man walking. And he realized nothing had changed. Ahab was still more afraid of Jezebel than he was of God. So this man who had challenged the king and taunted 450 prophets ran for his life. And he was so discouraged and ashamed by his failure, he wanted to die. But God graciously did not give him what he wanted. Instead, God gave him a nap, and he fed him with angel-baked bread and sent him to Mount Horeb. And that 40-day journey to Mount Horeb was meant to remind Elijah of God's unfailing faithfulness to Israel while they wandered in the desert for 40 years. See, part of Elijah's problem was that Jezebel's threat had made him lose focus. He ran for his life, forgetting that God had provided for him and protected him from Ahab for 3 years. Surely God could protect him from Jezebel, right? Now, it's easy to criticize Elijah, but don't we act the same way? Things don't go our way and we act as if God has let us down. Please remember, we overcome and prevent discouragement by reminding ourselves of the unchanging character of God. He will never leave us nor forsake us, even when we have failed. When Elijah got to Mount Horeb, the Lord asked him, "What are you doing here?" And Elijah's answer oozes with self-pity and defeat. "I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." In other words, Elijah is saying, despite his zeal and hard work, the people are still covenant breakers. So God responds by meeting with him, by passing before him. But not with a mighty wind that blew over the mountain, not in the earthquake that shook the mountain, and not in the fire that raged on the mountain. God spoke in a low whisper. What was the point? God was reminding Elijah, God's action is often unnoticed and undramatic. It is nonetheless present and powerful. Elijah had fallen into a pitfall common to our results-oriented society. Like us, he wanted to see fruit right away. And it's not wrong to want fruit. The problem comes when we judge the presence or absence of fruit by our eyes. See, we are called to walk by faith and not by sight. In the words of William Cooper, blind unbelief is sure to err and scan his work in vain. God is his own interpreter, and he will make it plain. So God asks Elijah a second time what he was doing there, and Elijah gave the same answer. And so God sends him to anoint 3 people. Hazael as king of Syria, Jehu as king of Israel, and Elisha as a prophet to replace him. In telling him to anoint Hazael, God was reminding Elijah that his control and authority extended over the whole earth, not just over Israel. And despite Israel's rebellion, Yahweh was still in charge. That's why he instructed Elijah to anoint Jehu as king over Israel. And the appointment of Elisha was meant to tell Elijah that the work would continue, even if the future looked bleak. Moreover, in giving Elijah these instructions, the Lord was telling him, Elijah, I'm not done with you. But that's not all. God also corrects Elijah's claim that he alone was faithful. God tells him, I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. See, part of Elijah's problem was that he had lost perspective. He had never been alone, even if he felt alone. A government official named Obadiah had supported 100 prophets of the Lord during the drought, while Elijah was being hidden by the Lord. And there were 7,000 people who had remained faithful to God. And we lose perspective too, don't we? We often get discouraged because we think we're alone in our struggles and everything's up to us. In fact, we forget what God had made clear to Elijah. It wasn't Elijah's job to make people faithful. God was the one preserving his remnant. In short, Elijah had no good reason to be discouraged. God's cause was in God's hands, and it would prevail because God will not fail. Elijah got discouraged because he took his eyes off of God and he started looking at himself, at Jezebel, and at the people. And the same holds true for us, doesn't it? We need to remember the words of Isaiah 26, verses 3 and 4. You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord God is an everlasting rock. Isaiah captures both our responsibility to trust and God's strength that enables us to keep trusting him. Note that stayed is passive because it is God who keeps us focused on him. See, God loved Elijah too much to give up on him. He brought him back from his discouragement and restored him to active service. God continued to be faithful in the face of his servant's failure. And Elijah's failure is meant to help us all realize our own frailty and to point us back to Jesus Christ, who was the only human being to be faithful to the end. And here's the good news. Jesus was faithful on our behalf, and his redemptive accomplishment is the basis of our hope. Because Jesus died and rose again, we have a hope that is steadfast and sure, our disappointments notwithstanding. And as we look at our setbacks, our failures, from the standpoint of our eternal hope, we realize that our difficulties are but light and momentary afflictions. And they are even God's means of shaping us into the image of Christ. So we can rejoice and we can persevere despite our failures, because these struggles are working for us a far more exceeding weight of glory. God is using them to transform us into the image of Christ. Lord willing, we'll see each other tomorrow. But till then, stay focused on Jesus, who gives us peace. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord God is an everlasting rock.